This is the story of Ellen and Arthur. They're brother and sister in their early 50s. They had an aunt who passed away. She had $1 million. Each one got $500,000. This is how they handled it. Completely different. Ellen paid off her mortgage, $280,000. And then she did some home renovation. Then she had some fun. She went out and did a cruise, and she did some gifting. But 3 years later, all that money was gone. But, of course, she has all the equity in her house. Arthur went about this differently. He paid off his credit cards and other high-interest debt that he had. Then he increased his contributions to his retirement accounts. And then, because that hurt a little bit, he used some of the money as gap money along the way. 3 years later, he's still got a lot left over. Two completely different ways of handling the inheritance. So, Mike, what do you see when somebody inherits money? Do they keep their head and look to the future, or do they get a little stupid and say, I've always wanted that boat and that condo, and then off they go? What do you see?
Well, it's always an interesting conversation. As a financial planning firm, we've always taken a little bit different approach towards financial planning. And, most of the time when you sit down with an advisor of some sort, they talk to you about investments and, maybe they talk to you about income. But they're phase one fiduciaries, which is really they talk about the old stuff, the people, things that you really need to pay attention to when you're younger. As a phase two fiduciary, we're really looking at this second phase of your life. And it includes everything from tax planning to long-term care to your investments to securing the income. All those things are important. But estate planning is a big piece of this, right? And it's interesting. Whenever I sit down with mom and dad or the clients, they always talk about whoever's going to inherit the money, and they talk about how the family dynamics, and for the most part, they all think it's all going to go nice and smooth. And I always have to tell them, death and money make people stupid across the board. Death and money make them stupid, and it causes so much infighting when there's not clear and precise instructions and directions on what to do. I mean, it has to be clear. You can't just let people decide what's going to happen, because it never turns out the way you thought it was going to be. And, for better or for worse, I hate to say it this way, we all have unresolved mommy and daddy issues. You went to your baseball game, they didn't come to mine, or whatever it happened to be. So yeah, two different approaches. And, part of inheriting money is that whole emotional side of things, right? So, when they inherited money from their aunt and uncle, or from their aunt, the emotional side evidently for Ellen, it just made sense. She felt emotionally better. I mean, I got to tell you, I think Arthur had a better choice. If Ellen had come to me, I'd have told her to put that $500, rather than paying $300,000 down on the house, take the $300,000, put it into account, take the yield off it to help make the mortgage payments, if that's what you needed to do. But certainly don't give up that asset, because now what she has is an ATM card on the house if she wants to get money out of it. So it is always amazing that parents or aunts and uncles in this situation don't really have those conversations with their kids about what money means and how to handle it. And even if the kids are going to make the final decision on how they spend the money, you as mom and dad, it's completely reasonable to share your aspirations on how that money might be used. And, kids always say, oh, it's their money, just they can do whatever they want with it. And mom and dad said, I don't care, they're going to inherit, they can do whatever they want with it. Yeah, that's all true. But if mom and dad are watching you from above, right, and they're sitting there watching you buy a Lamborghini and, taking, cruises on Ritz-Carlton cruises for, $50,000 a person and all that stuff, they're going to be cringing, because they worked really hard to save that $1 million that they left you. And all of a sudden they're seeing you, quite frankly, piss it away on stuff. Yeah, it gives you that immediate gratification. But the fact is that estate planning is just as integral as the income planning, as the asset allocation, as the tax planning. And any sound financial plan has to have estate planning in it, which is why, for us, people hear me rant and rave about taxes, that, I don't understand how you can make an investment decision or get investment advice from some advisor who doesn't understand the very tax implications of the investment recommendation he's making. Well, the same thing holds true for these investments when it comes to estate planning. They don't understand the tax implications of them. They don't understand how the money's going to pass to the next generation. They don't set up accounts. Did you know everybody gets sold this idea of having a trust? And I'm not poo-pooing trusts. They come in handy. but you can avoid probate on every single thing you own. And probate itself in the state of Maryland, and we're all over the country, but in the state of Maryland, probate takes typically a year to 2 years to get through, and it costs anywhere from 2 to 3% of the value of the estate. So let's say you have a house worth $500,000 and you have $1 million of investments and it goes through probate, $1.5 million, all of a sudden that's $30,000 worth of expenses, where an advisor, a phase 2 fiduciary would have told you, put a beneficiary on the house, so that when you die, the house goes automatically to the kids. Put beneficiaries on all the accounts, so when you die, all the money goes automatically to the kids. And if all your money is in qualified accounts, IRAs and 401ks, make sure they're structured in such a way that they go as tax efficiently as possible to the next generation. And if you want to work with a phase 2, if you want to understand how your estate plan is going to interact with your investments, with the legacy that you're leaving your kids and or grandkids or whomever it happens to be, if the money's going to the right people in the right manner, my older boy, I love him to death, but if I give him $1, he spends $3 by Friday. My younger boy, I give him $1, he's got $3 by Friday. And I did verify that my younger son's not giving the money to my older brother, to my older son, that has to pay it back. All children, all people who inherit money, they are going to have a different perception. It's so important that you get this right, because you know what? After the fact, you don't get a do-over. Once it's done, once you passed away, you're stuck with whatever mess was there.
Lawrence, one of the things about inheriting money is it might come to you in different ways. For instance, an IRA comes to you, a 401k comes to you. You're going to be able to deal with that money in a different way than a savings account or a CD that mom had at the bank. They sell a house, and all of a sudden someone looks at you and says, step-up basis. And you go, what the heck is that? There's a lot of twists and turns here when you inherit money as to how you treat it and the tax liabilities of it when it comes your way, isn't there?
There is, and I think that's one of the biggest things about Prostatis that we do, and what Mike, reiterated was that we are that one-stop shop. So we're able to handle all aspects of the financial plan for our clients. And one of the most important things, I have clients all the time when we go through the estate planning meeting with them that, there's such a relief that their kids or whoever's inheriting the money only have to go to one person, right? So they tell me all the time, I'm just going to tell my kids to look at the binder and give you a phone call, and then they'll figure it out from there. Because we know what the estate documents are saying, who's getting what. We're making sure that they're putting a beneficiary on the house. We know the 401ks or the IRAs or the individual accounts, the different types of accounts, and how those assets will transfer to the kids and the tax implications and what the distributions or the RMDs that have to be on them. So we really understand every single aspect of the plan. And part of us is making sure there's a smooth transition. We want to make it as easy as possible on anyone inheriting the money. So part of the overarching philosophy as well is that we want to make that transition smooth and as easy as possible for loved ones, because they're already going through a difficult time with losing a parent or losing a loved one. We want to make it as easy as possible for them to, get the house or get those assets, transition assets, and not have to jump through hoops to figure out where did mom have this or where did dad have this, but everything can be in one place. And we'll walk them through every single step of the process to make sure that the assets are transferred and put into the proper accounts for them. So,
and Lawrence, I just want to throw this out there because you mentioned something about making this smooth as possible and easy as possible and understanding the tax ramifications. So, one of the biggest mistakes I see on a regular basis, and it's unfortunate when it happens, but a husband and wife, and we're just going to kill off the guy first, but he dies at an early age, right? He dies before they're both 59 and a half. And what I see all the time is that the surviving spouse goes to some financial advisor who sold whatever investment vehicles they are using, or maybe even talks to the guy at the 401k company, and they roll the money into the spouse's IRA, the surviving spouse's IRA. And oh my God, what a mistake that happens to be. Because if you roll an inheritance into your own personal IRA as a surviving spouse, you're subject to all the normal IRA rules. If you leave it in an inherited IRA account for the deceased spouse for your benefit, so it's a deceased spouse IRA for the benefit of the surviving spouse, leaving it there, tax rules change completely. 100% difference. And the other thing that, Randy, you brought this up, and I thought this was fascinating, that step up in basis, what ends up happening is when you pass away, and I'm just going to use mom and dad. Mom and dad had a house they bought on the Magathie River, a waterfront property. They bought it in the 50s, and they paid $50,000 for it. They put $100,000 in improvements. But that house is worth $1 million now. So, under old rules, when mom and dad died, your cost in the house was $150,000. You sold it for $1 million. You had to pay tax on the difference, and that goes to it's painful enough. I just lost mom and dad, and now I got to pay all this taxes. Well, they changed the rule. You get what's called a step up in basis. So when mom and dad dies, if the house is worth $1 million at their death, your deemed cost in the house for tax purposes is $1 million. So when you sell it, because of closing costs, you actually wind up with a loss. So it's one of the few times you can take a loss on the sale of real estate that's not rental property. But here's a little known thing that people don't pay attention to. And I think this is, again, one of those advantages. We've talked about phase 2 fiduciaries on several occasions now. But what a phase 2 fiduciary can do for you, they understand the tax implications of not only what happens when you pass away, but that step up in basis. Do you actually have to wait until you pass away to get a step up in basis? No, you do not have to die to get a step up in basis. You just know how to have the account structured properly to get a step up in basis while you're still alive, right? So imagine this. We had clients come in just recently. Well, it's about a year ago now. They had $8 million of Apple stock, right? They had $8 million worth of Apple stock, and they wanted to diversify because basically all their eggs were in one basket, but their cost basis was less than $1 million. So they'd been working with an advisor. All he could do is give them margin accounts, which, okay, that's fine. I have no problem with margin accounts, but as the interest on that account kept going up and up and up, and all of a sudden it's 8-10% interest on the money they were borrowing, they recognized that was a problem. They talked to their accountant. Their accountant said, you just got to pay the tax. So they were going to lose basically 23.5% to the federal, plus in Maryland, another 9% to the state of Maryland. So they're losing over 30% in taxes to diversify their portfolio. And they sat down with us, and, Lawrence and I we sat down and dealt with them. And Lawrence and I were like, okay, well, what happens if we have a plan? What happens if we can create a strategy? We're going to use a very simple trust. We're going to transfer the Apple stock into the trust. And in about a year from now, all things being equal, in about a year from now, if everything works out the way we planned, you're going to get a step up in basis in that stock. So a year from now, and it took about 18 months for us in this situation, but 18 months later, all of a sudden they got a step up in basis. They could then sell all that stock, that $10 million in stock, paid zero taxes on it because they were working with a phase 2 fiduciary.
When we do this show, there are some of you out there that don't have any financial help at all, so we introduce you to Mike and Lawrence. There are others of you who probably have an advisor, and you wonder, hey, is my person doing everything that Mike is talking about right now? And you say to yourself, no, I've not heard anybody talk like that. Well, that's that ongoing support that Mike and the team at Prostatis Financial can provide. And that is invaluable for if something like this happens, you've got somebody to go to. Take a look at the website, thesavvyinvestorradio.com. If you save $500,000 or more for retirement, this is where the power of planning really starts to kick in. Tax planning, Social Security planning, income planning. Let's get it all done for you. Let's actually do the math on your retirement. A no cost, no obligation look at where you are and what it looks like for you in retirement. And if there's some gaps there, let's get them filled.